Hello, everyone. I'm Yati Padia, a team member of Girls Kid Foundation and HyperEdge. I welcome you all to the first ever Flow Hackathon. We are organizing the Flow Hackathon of 2023 with the goal of encouraging new innovative apps aimed at mainstream adoption. The hackathon will occur in three phases: education series, which we are starting today, the builder sprints, which is a combination of offline and online hackathons worldwide, and the launchpad, which will be a startup mentorship period for the teams to help them go for testnet to mainnet. This year, we have a prize pool of $5 lakh along with exciting prizes and bounties that we have mentioned on our website. Before we begin, I would like to thank all our sponsors and community partners for making this hackathon possible. So, starting off with the first session of education series, that is Introduction to Flow. Now, let's welcome our speaker, Layne LaFrance, accompanied by Advocacy Head of Flow, Andrea Motani, to introduce us all to Flow. To give a brief about the speaker, I'll just go ahead with Layne LaFrance, who is who co-created CryptoKitties, the first application of NFTs in 2017, which is a feat that led her to co-design Flow, which is a public decentralized blockchain designed specifically to support the dense universe of content that exists around great creators, brands, and communities. Layne believes deeply in the future public blockchains will enable, a future characterized by individuals' ownership, agency, and participation in their communities. She spends her time thinking about applications that showcase that power. Du- so, guys, during the session, please feel free to ask questions in the chat section, and I would take it over to the speakers, and they can answer the questions. So, over to you, Layne and Andrea. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for the introduction. Hey, everybody. So good to see you all here. Hi, I'm Layne. I'm one of the co-founders of CryptoKitties. As mentioned, one of the co-founders of Flow. And indeed, I spend pretty much all of my time thinking about really interesting applications that will change the way that people feel about the experiences that they're having online. And Flow is definitely a really cool platform to do that, especially with great developers like all of you coming to the hackathon and showcasing that to your friends, family, and the future of adoptees on Web3. So happy to have you all here. Thanks for making the time. I am here to tell you a little bit about how Flow came into existence, the story for that, the reasons for that, the journey of that, and to answer any questions. And then Andrea is going to dig into the details of some of the practical considerations that should be made considering all of that. So yeah, let's get into it. The first and most important thing to know about Flow is that it was not born out of a desire to build a blockchain. We set out to build really great user experiences. Actually, the team that founded CryptoKitties, my co-founding, like the group of us that were co-founders on CryptoKitties, we sat down and said, how are we going to make people understand the benefits of crypto, of blockchain, of Web3? And we looked at every use case you can imagine. We looked at real estate. We looked at there was a geology pitch at one point, development project, I mean, like physical development. We looked at stable coins, any of the things that people were raising ICOs on in 2017 for Ethereum, and all of those product endeavors left us with a really core problem, which was the switching cost is going to be way too high for people. Changing from the existing real estate system, for example, to a brand new one back in 2017 was a pretty big pill to swallow. And so we were racking our brains for ways to showcase the power of the technology in a really approachable, really fun way. And we were a group of people that had long had experience building mobile applications. We had done a lot of consumer apps and things of that sort, more so than B2B type stuff. And so my first day, they sit me down and the prompt was like, we got to build something in crypto. It was August 2017, stuff was going on. I had just quit my job in Hong Kong to come back to Vancouver to work with this team. and make something in crypto that people were going to get excited about. And so we sit down, and Deet and Mac sit me down, and they're like, so we think the thing to do is put cats on the blockchain. And I didn't even hesitate. The first thing I said was absolutely 100% yes, we have to do it. This is the way. We got to get cats on the blockchain. People love cats. People are trying to get blockchain. Like, I don't even know what this means. None of us knew what it meant at the time, but that's exactly what we have to do. And so the journey into Flow started very much with this proposition that we were going to create an application that made concrete the benefits that we were talking about in the world of blockchain and Web3. Back in 2017, there was definitely a narrative, as many of you know, that crypto would disrupt every industry, that it would be an absolutely game-changing technology for global coordination. And we bought into all of that. We still do. We are still huge proponents of the value of open internet, the value of definitely open source and the contributions and the social and technical value that can be created when you really open things up. And so we set out to launch CryptoKitties, and we decided to do that. It was like the second week of September. A month later, CryptoKitties was at ETH Waterloo Hackathon. And a month after that, we had launched it, not after having to relaunch it because there was a bug in the smart contract. And so very early on in the process, we were running into hiccups with developing on the existing Web3 stack that were definitely attributed to how early the industry was. And that was something we were really comfortable with. You know, we knew we were early adopters. We knew not all the tooling was there. And I mean, in many ways, it's still not. But, you know, so we're like gritting our teeth, we're cutting through the trees. They're like, you know, think machetes and pioneering new ground. Every day was an adventure in the sense that we had solved new problems that we didn't know we were going to have to solve the day before. Because the world was different there, right? Like building on a decentralized public blockchain like Ethereum is totally different to building an entirely centralized application where you get to make all of the choices. And that was something we felt very acutely on the day that CryptoKitties broke Ethereum, because not only were our users like, what the heck is going on? Like, I can't buy a cat. Transaction fees are so high. What's a MetaMask? Where's my wallet? People were beside themselves asking us to help them sort of improve their own experience. Most of the things that they were flagging there, especially the examples I just gave, like transaction fees, were way out of our control. Unlike a centralized application, we couldn't just change the fees. We couldn't pay them on people's behalf. We were bound to the constraints of the system in exchange for also being bound to the opportunity of having that smart contract live forever and the knowledge that people would own their CryptoKitties forever. And so there was a clear trade-off there, but it was a tough one because we, as application developers on that day when our users were very upset, and on a day when community members of Ethereum were sending us death threats because they're like, hey guys, cool that you did cats or whatever, but I have serious financial applications. Like I have real work to do. Get your stupid cats off this blockchain right now. And we couldn't. There was nothing we could do. You know, like we felt for those developers. We felt for other people in the ecosystem who really did have important, you know, people were using Ethereum for remittances. They were using it for very real applications. And we didn't mean to soak up all of the network load with a capacity with our, you know, air quote silly cat app, but that was the nature of the system. Like what the customers were largely demanding was using the CryptoKitties smart contract more so than others, and that was really bidding up the cost of participating. So transaction fees, which are demand based on Ethereum, and it was also just totally overloading the network. Like the node software just had not seen volume like that before. And people, like the Geth team was reaching out to us and like, guys, what are you doing? Like, we'll help you. We're sorry. We don't like, we didn't know that the ceiling of performance was so low. Like we thought there were thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people here. We didn't know that CryptoKitties with like dozens of thousands of users was going to bring the network to its knees. And so that became sort of the first seemingly insurmountable hurdle to using the existing stack. You know, at that point in the journey, we had run into issues with the CryptoKitties smart contract and had to reissue it. Anyone who's written a smart contract or any amount of code for that matter knows that usually you don't get it right the first time. And so that inflexibility, as much as we were excited about making sure people own these cats forever and immutability was incredibly important to us, practically as app developers, we were like, this is insane. We need a beta period. Like, how are we supposed to be expected to get this right 100% the very, very first time? You know, it was a pretty high bar, even for a pretty experienced team that had worked together before. And, you know, then
Elaine,
CryptoKitties break.
sorry to disturb you, but we have a question sometime
Yeah.
back. I think part of it you have already answered, but the question goes here like, how did CryptoKitties get momentum? Where did the traffic come from during the launch? So, like, if you want to add any more to it.
Yeah, great question. So that hackathon, ETH Waterloo and so guys, hackathons are the key. This is your ticket to stardom too. I would largely attribute that to our participation in the ETH Waterloo hackathon. We had a really, really great community team. Well, a great team in general. Jordan, Fabiano, Arthur, and Benny went to ETH Waterloo just a little bit before we had launched CryptoKitties and came up with this really great little, they've made sort of like Pokemon cards, but put cat stickers on them. And it said, I think it just said, oh gosh, I wish I still had one. I think it said cats are coming to the blockchain. And then it was a register here at CryptoKitties domain, or just like a QR that went to our landing page. So we were building a sign up list basically at the hackathon for people who are interested. And it was a very like cheeky, you know, like come see what we're doing with cats on the blockchain kind of vibe. And so that we activated that mailing list just prior. And then I think it was also testament to the need for something concrete. That was what, like for me as a product person, the thing that was most missing from the industry was just like something that people could see having value and see move around, that wasn't just a string of integers. Like that just, it wasn't as meaningful to people, even though there was of course real value attached to all of those tokens. It just didn't register. And so the cats, I think, were really easy for people to talk about. And so once people were activated to the mailing list, it was just a very easy thing for them to say to their mom or their friend or their sibling, whatever, have you seen this cat thing on Ethereum? And it was pretty shareable. So I would say that definitely spurred the beginning of it. But then the subsequent interest came after we had broken Ethereum and people were reporting that cats broke the blockchain. And then there was, of course, another, like a second wave of interest. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Len. There is one more question. It's like, do Flowchain have zero knowledge proofs? It's question from Subham. He want to do something near that.
Yeah, great question. So I was just about to get into this, so maybe we'll oh no, this is a good time. So so the big issues that we were running into with CryptoKitties were like, we're having to reissue the smart contract. Users are really upset about how high transaction fees are, and there's nothing we can do about it. And the bottom line is like, we just can't even onboard more users. We had to scale this experience and we weren't able to. And so there are sort of broadly three categories, I guess, of scaling things. And one is zero knowledge proofs, or a notion of compact proofs. The idea that you would take the computation of the state and you would produce a proof about it that's easy to check and relatively lightweight, so you're not adding all of the load of checking it to the chain. And that is definitely a good option for some applications. Flow is flexible enough to have zero knowledge proofs, but it does not rely on them for its scaling. And many of the scaling, the other two options are sort of state channels, which is a version of a trusted setup, and side chains, which is also sort of a version of a trusted setup. And in all of those cases, we consider those really important boosters to scale when you have a smallish group of sort of community members who trust each other to have small provable interactions that they just report back to the chain. But we don't rely on any of those things for the core scaling of Flow, because as this research project started, and this is exactly where the story goes next, when CryptoKitties wasn't able to scale in Ethereum, we sat down and we looked at all those options I just mentioned among a couple others, and we were like, well, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna change the application, or which chain are we gonna build on so that we're able to scale this? And that was how Flow was born. It was that scaling CryptoKitties on Ethereum ideally question, and it was reading all of the white papers for alternative chains. It was reading the white papers for like Snarks and Starks were very popular at the time, other zero knowledge proofs. We looked at state channels that we could implement, side chains. We looked at everything. And we spent 3 months, I would say, reading, myself, Dieter, a number of engineers on the team, some of who are still working on Flow. And it came up dry. That research expedition came up dry. And it came up dry not because there weren't really compelling ideas from the community. There was, clearly a lot of thought, care, attention that was going into this problem. But practically what we were seeing was the ceiling was just like fundamentally too low, the way that the problem was being addressed. And what I mean by that is public blockchains sort of, especially at the time, we had really championed this idea that everyone participates, everybody is involved in consensus, everyone's involved in checking it. Like, that's the security. The social value of this is everyone's participation in both executing and checking the state of the chain. And the benefit of that is something that we bought into deeply. The importance of anyone being able to check their transaction, the importance of auditability, verifiability, participation, all of those things are very important. But when you ask every single person to do all of those tasks, which are fundamentally different, you end up with this very inherent bottleneck. And that was fairly apparent. We've done the talk of separation of concerns, and if you want to dig into the details of this, there is a paper on the separation of concerns, consensus, and compute, and it discusses in great detail how we went through this. But I'll just, for the sake of this presentation, make it very high level and say basically there was a bottleneck. There was a bottleneck that was really obvious when you were asking everyone to do everything. And when we were racking our brains for sort of the way to address scale on Ethereum, and seeing that like all of these, even the smartest ideas, were just like not fundamentally addressing that root bottleneck, we decided to think about sort of reconsidering the assumptions about what needed to happen for each of those nodes. And so the insight covered in the white paper, that first technical white paper that maybe Andrea could link for us here if anyone's interested in reading it, and I think he'll go into some detail on it later, just really emphasize the importance of having nodes that were specialized in tasks like performance and security, but which were also cryptographically liable, I guess I'll say. So their actions were always checked, and it was important that we were able to punish any misactor, but it wasn't critical that everyone do every single thing. And so that was sort of the core scaling insight that drove the development of Flow. And so I think we can nearly go to the next slide, but basically we didn't set out to build a blockchain. That's what I really want to emphasize. Flow was not born out of a desire to build a blockchain or anything like that. We were trying to build an application, a really cool application, and we hit enough barriers along the way that we decided we needed something else. And the reason we needed something else is because we, as this says, we really wanted to ship 10x UX. We wanted to ship experiences that change the way people see the world. And I think, some of the sports projects on Flow have definitely shown that sports moments are changing the relationship for fans. And that's something that we wouldn't have seen before the world of Web3, and especially not before the world of Web3 on Flow, where that many people and fans and community members could come together and celebrate games. 10x UX also meant having ownership that spanned borders, and acknowledging that that was going to be an absolutely life-changing opportunity for a lot of people in the world, and making sure it was accessible to everyone, regardless of their existing economic, political, geographic ties or anything like that. And the last part of 10xing UX, I guess, was and the knowledge that we needed a development paradigm that would enable exponential organic growth and really offer more choice and service to all communities. And that was definitely the most abstract promise at the time. And it probably still is in many ways, this idea of open ecosystems, and the idea that you gain more from opening and engaging with others rather than cornering resources and keeping them to yourselves. But we're going to dig into this more because it's one of the most exciting parts of shipping applications on Flow. It's one of the most exciting parts of participating in Web3, and it could very well be this change in paradigm of collaborating and enabling organic growth rather than competing could be a defining feature of the next era of technical innovation, which is really exciting. And so those were our North Stars when we set out to build Flow. And well, sorry, those were our North Stars when we set out to build CryptoKitties, and then we weren't able to deliver them the way that we wanted to. And that was where Flow was born from. Next slide, please. The other thing that was really important to us was that the platform we were building on really was the internet for community. And what I mean by that is I think more and more as folks are seeing people grow up entirely with the internet in their lives, or a lot of us grew up with the internet sort of partway through our lives. But we're learning a lot about the importance of managing data over time and how to respect individuals' values and the right way to bring individuals into sort of an extended World Wide Web ecosystem that respects their autonomy, expression, and identity. And that internet is so important for the future of anyone using the internet. The first version of the internet is full of photos that I think we all wish we could take down, and it's full of all kinds of things that had we maybe known better, we wouldn't have entered them into the ether forever. But the internet does need to support community. It does need to support people existing there for a long time and having really complex relationships with each other. And so even in 2017, and even especially more now, we were hearing a lot about this ask for autonomy. People really wanted more freedom and choice between services that better serve their needs. And that was really just the tip of the iceberg, because people were getting excited about expression. Creating content is something that is basically the lifeblood of the internet these days. Content creators are going to be the kings of the castle in no time. And humans are, we want to share the things that we create. We want to entertain and be entertained, and the ability to do that and be compensated for it critically, because right now those creators, sometimes business models for their creations are not in their favor. They are very much managed by the middle people, sorry. So the ability to create something and be compensated for it when you are really adding value to your community is something that we wanted to capture. I think that really will be a viable career path. It already is a viable career path for many people, and it will be even more so. And so ensuring that there was a platform that could compensate people who are adding creative works to the system was really important to us. And the last part of building internet for the community was an acknowledgement that communities are made up of individuals. Individuals have identity and they have reputation, and the membership of different groups that they're in is not exactly the same to their friends. We are similar to our friends in many ways, but we are not all the same. And that membership to groups, our reputation, our identity, who we identify as, who we're showing up as online, totally changes our experience. And that's an area where it's really important to maintain and respect people's right to privacy and ownership of data, and also ensure the flexibility and freedom for them to take their data with them, take their assets with them. And much like in the real world, you're able to take your stuff, put it in your car and drive somewhere else. The internet often sort of locks your car, metaphorically, into the experience that you're in. Like you log in and you put your credentials in there, and then that app, once you've driven into the parkade of that one building, you don't get to go to another one. You're locked in, and we decided that just couldn't be the case on Flow. This needed to be a platform for ecosystems. It needed to be a platform for people, for worlds, for communities. And in order for that to be true, it needed to respect individuals as individuals, and it needed to make it easy for them to move seamlessly through the different communities that define them. And that was a subtle but really critical part of the design decision that we didn't, Flow is obviously architected for scale. It was definitely architected for better UX, both for users and developers, but architecting it to ensure respective individuals was actually led us to create the account model. And Flow does now run on the account model, and Andrea is going to dig into this in more detail as well. But the important thing to know about that is that it really prioritizes individuals as the rights owners and agents of their data and value, and it gives dApps access to that. It's not the case that the dApp makes unilateral decisions on the user's behalf, basically. And so that, to us, is a really important part of internet for community, because it means that experiences here are flexible enough for them to really encompass all of someone's life without being prescriptive about exactly which brand they're engaging with or exactly which experience they're having. It's up to them. And so there's lots of flexibility between custodial, non-custodial, and everything on the spectrum in between for wallets on Flow. That's made possible by the account model, the flexibility of the transaction structure, the ability to have multiple keys on the account, all of this, more things in the details that Andre will get into. And so we can go to the next slide, please. The really big, what I've mentioned is sort of the design constraints that we were facing. But the really key insight that we stumbled upon when building CryptoKitties, more so even than the performance ceiling, was the ability for people to build without platform risk. And that meant so much to us. It was an absolute game changer for impact, because we were a group of people who had previously identified that sometimes there are platforms that have a rightful majority on the attention of a group or a user base. The example I'm going to give is GitHub. So GitHub is where we were pushing code. We did all of our work in GitHub, and we loved the product, but it many years ago lacked a project management functionality. And so we, the co-founding team of CryptoKitties in a past sort of life, had spent a great deal of time building Chrome extensions for GitHub in order to improve our own development experience. And that was huge for us, because it not only improved our experience building with GitHub and helped us ship code faster, it also meant that we could tap into an existing resource and it meant that we could tap into an existing resource and customer base without having to do all of the legwork of transitioning people to a new platform. Everyone could stay, we and everyone else could stay on GitHub, but we were able to offer them new services that we wouldn't have been able to otherwise. And in the case of CryptoKitties, that was just built in by default. The ability for people to build on top of CryptoKitties was the nature of smart contracts. It was the nature of the fact that we had shipped it on a public platform. And so having these usable public APIs for devs to tap into meant that they could add services and products to our service, in this case, CryptoKitties, to add value for customers. And that absolutely thrilled us. Like, people are building for our users for free? Are you serious? Like, yes, please. Like, let them do that all day, every day. And critically, those developers were just as excited as we were, because it was a viable business model for them. And that ability to ship on top of other people's code and build your own opportunity on top of it is something that we are now sort of referring to as composability. And composability, that complexity of many applications interacting with each other and being extended in different directions to serve smaller communities, is the superpower of Flow. I think we will come to see it as the superpower of Web3, but it's exactly what Flow was designed for. It's not, smart contracts exist on Ethereum, and they absolutely give you the guarantees about being able to build on top of an application in the future. But the ability to support complex evolution of different products is something that we already, sort of saw crumble when people were first starting to build on CryptoKitties. So when they built on CryptoKitties, they added kitty hats. But any more complexity than like a couple applications or many users would have certainly been more than the chain could have handled. And so Flow was entirely designed to be able to support that complexity that's inherent to communities. And that opens up a well of opportunity, which is what I'm really excited to talk to you about. So next slide, please. Composability is defined most by how it will change how we do business. I think it prioritizes collaboration rather than competition. And that's really exciting, because it puts individuals in the driver's seat, it puts their communities in close second, and it puts companies third. Companies being sort of the proponents of competition and trying to extract value out of a cornered resource or a sort of ownership over a small group of people or their data, rather than competing on adding net new value. And so composability, with all of the opportunities it offers to collaborate on different things and build on top of existing projects, means that by nature, all of the development effort that's being put in is net new innovation. It's net new value creation for communities. And it's not about trying to siphon off value from existing area of the ecosystem or compete for attention. Like everything here gets to be additive because of the nature of the flexibility of the account model. And so I can't emphasize enough that composability is huge. It's huge technically. It totally reduces the risk of building. It lets you build on standards that are already in use. It lets you tap into existing not only ecosystems, but services. And in that sense, like really reduces development risk for people, but also just leaves so much room for innovation rather than, starting everything from scratch over again. So technically composability is really, really cool. It brings development costs way down, brings barriers to entry way down, brings certainty that your applications are going to be safe and reliable for users way up because you're using these standards that the protocol respects and understands and other people understand. But technically, next slide, please. Composability is complex. It's not complicated. It's very simple because you're using standards and you're using things that make sense. You can kind of think of it like assembling ingredients in a cake rather than trying to like go mill your own flour. But it is complex, and it's complex because individuals and their preferences are complex. Who we engage with and identify with and who our friends are. Those are very complex social transactions that are different between individuals, and that graph of social interactions needs to be able to evolve and change without compromising user rights or freedoms. And so supporting that world, one where individuals want to have their socks knocked off with really great UX, and one for communities who cherish their interactions and want to add to them, does really need a platform that supports composability and supports that composability at scale for large communities. And so that is why we built Flow. Next slide, please. Flow is, and I'm about to pass it to Andrea, but quick summary. Flow is built for the next era of web. It's one that will be characterized by the authenticity of its content, agency for individuals, flexibility for developers, and interactions with users that offer safety and certainty for all. It was architected to support the innate complexity of individuals moving between communities and experiences at scale. It executes Cadence, the programming language that is designed specifically to keep user value safe, available, and flexible on the Flow virtual machine. So Flow is FVM, not EVM. And Flow powers you to own your own value online, create your favorite communities and be compensated for it, and develop unprecedented experiences. So I deeply thank all of you for contemplating joining us in this journey of building the future of the web. I'm very excited to see what you create as part of this hackathon or any upcoming endeavors. And if there are any other questions, you can definitely reach out to me on Twitter. And I am just humbled and grateful to have all of you part of this on this journey with us, because there's something really special happening here, and it's so great to have all of you be a part of it. So with that, Andrea is going to lead us through some of the more practical elements of what it means to build on Flow and make concrete the theory that I set out for us. So I'll pass it to him.
Thank you, Layne. And we have a comment from Dustin who says, great job. So I +1 that, great job. Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Andrea. I'm a dev advocate on the Flow team, and I want to give you an introduction to Flow, building on Flow, and also talk a little bit about the hackathon and yeah, set the stage for the next couple of weeks. So what is Flow? Layne has kind of given the context as to why it exists today and all the thought that's gone behind it. So as she said at the beginning, it hasn't happened by accident. It was a very much conscious decision with a lot of work that went behind it. And really the purpose of building a new protocol was to create a consumer scale Web3 experience. And Flow has shown and has proven to be that layer one that enables consumer scale Web3 experiences. Just, a couple examples. NBA Top Shot introduced many hundreds of thousands of people, if not more, to the world of Web3. And recently, big projects on Ethereum, which we will see, have come to Flow specifically because it's user friendly, it's mainstream ready, it's battle tested, and we'll get into a little bit of the details. And especially it's utility driven, both from a user side as well as a developer side. And we will cover all of this now. So let's start with the last point, which is battle tested and scalable. Differently to other chains, and Layne, you touched this on one of the questions, which was, how do you scale and how do you scale consensus beyond when you start to get a lot of traffic? And one way to do that is to shard the chain. One way to do that is to create layer twos. Flow took a different approach, and the approach was some lighting. Yeah, the approach was to rather than have every node do the same amount of work, which means that every node has to have enough power to do the compute, has to have be fast enough to do the consensus, and therefore it does everything slightly as a compromise. What Flow or what the architects behind Flow decided was, hey, why don't different nodes do different things? And they can be really good at doing those things, right? They can be optimized and purpose-built for doing those things. So the consensus nodes can be a lot slimmer and can therefore be run by a lot more people. Whereas the execution nodes that don't take part in the consensus, they can be big, beefy machines all the way up to massive data centers in the future, right? Therefore, it can scale at the layer one level without having to compromise, without having to shard state to different layer twos with different shards. And going back to composability, the fact that it's scalable at the layer one level without sharding means that all of the shared state remains integral, right? The integrity of the state makes composition that much more powerful, because any app, no matter where it is on Flow, has access to the same state as every other app. So massively scalable thanks to its multi-node architecture. It's also very sustainable. So one conscious decision back when it was designed was it shouldn't come at the cost of the environment. Here are just a couple of data points. But one fun fact is, minting an NFT on Flow takes much less energy than doing a Google search or posting an Instagram post. So when you're building on Flow and doing millions of transactions, you don't have to worry about the environment. It's the most eco-friendly Web3 protocol that you can build on. And most importantly, it has amazing onboarding. So if you've been following crypto Twitter and crypto news recently, you know that Doodles chose Flow as the chain to build Doodles 2 on. And this is a quote from Poopy, who is the founder of Doodles. And what he said was, we chose Flow because it was the way to create a frictionless on-chain apps that lets mainstream fans experience Doodles. And how did that go? Well, this is another quote from a user, right? Just created a wallet on Flow blockchain using Gmail in 30 seconds, purchased a Doodles 2 wearable item in under 2 minutes from start to finish. That kind of sums up Flow, not because of Doodles, not because of the specific wallets that were being used, but the foundations of Flow make this possible. The thought that went into building it allows for experiences like this to happen, whereas other chains, you literally cannot create an experience like this, because it's just technically not possible. So one great thing about Flow is, it has a very vibrant ecosystem, and as you all know, as you're here for the hackathon, you are here to enrich that ecosystem further. But so far, Flow is the number one is the number one chain in terms of NFT transaction volume. More than $4 billion have been raised across the ecosystem. There's more than 18 million user accounts and tens of thousands of developers. And that's why some of the biggest brands in the world are choosing Flow and building on Flow. So speaking of building on Flow, let's start taking a look, shall we? So the first thing, and one of the core pillars that sets Flow apart, and Layne touched on this as well, is Cadence. And let's talk a little bit about Cadence. So for those of you who don't know, Cadence is the smart contract programming language that is used to create smart contracts on Flow. And why did we choose to build a new language that's not EVM compatible, right? That's completely new, and it also has a different paradigm than what people were used to back in the day. Well, that's because Web3 has its own uniqueness. First of all, in Web3, or what makes Web3 particular is there's this concept of assets, right? There's this concept of something, there's this concept of value that moves across, whether they be transactions, whether they be images, or there's this concept of uniqueness and ownership. And therefore, there needs to be some way to represent that ownership and those assets in a way that is safe to write. And it would be best if that safety were enforced at the language level, right? And another thing that sets Flow apart is if you own an NFT, or you own a token, or you own something on chain, most of you think that you own it, but for example, on Ethereum, what you're actually owning is an entry in the smart contract that says your address has that, and everyone else is in the same smart contract. On Flow, we changed that, and things that you own are actually in your account, right? And this is what we call the resource orientation and account-based and the account-based model. So there's other guardrails that went into ensuring that Web3 had a better language, whether it be safer to write, have upgradable code. Of course, it should be open source, and also should have a familiar syntax. So let's see how Cadence addresses all of these. You've also might have heard recently that a couple chains are using a language called Move. Fun fact, Cadence is inspired by Move, which has been around for years now, and actually improved on Move. So if you learn Cadence, you are learning the better version. But yeah, so going back to what I was saying, Cadence is designed for Web3 thanks to its resource-oriented paradigm. The assets that you own, your NFTs, are stored in the accounts of the users, right? Therefore, they have full ownership. It's decentralized. There's no centralized contract that owns or keeps track of who owns what, and addresses some of the other safety concerns that the team faced when building CryptoKitties using Solidity. Cadence is obviously open source, and it has a very familiar syntax. So of course it's a new language, but it's very approachable. It's similar to TypeScript and Swift and Kotlin, if you're familiar with any of them. So maybe it'll take you like an hour or two to get familiar with the particular parts of it. But overall, it has a pretty familiar feel. And one of the biggest reasons why developers try out Flow and stay on Flow is Cadence. So sure, there's a little bit of a hurdle when you want to start, and you have to learn this relatively new language, even though it's pretty easy to learn. But once you learn it, you will never want to go back to a different smart contract programming language. And you can trust me on that. So here's a little glimpse of a piece of Cadence code. As you see, it's pretty readable, right? There's no weird machine code. There's no weird, byte code or something. Here we are declaring a contract, a basic NFT contract. And within the contract, we are creating a resource that we call NFT. And again, resources are those special objects in Cadence that are unique and cannot be accidentally duplicated or moved or lost. And you see how resources have this special life cycle where you have to explicitly create them and you have to move them somewhere, for example, saving them to your account. Now, this purpose of this slide is not to teach you Cadence. I think we have a boot camp starting today, which I'll talk about later. There's plenty of tutorials online. But what I wanted to show you is it's pretty readable, right? You don't need to be a machine to read this code. And it's pretty simple. So yeah, so I'll link to some resources later on how you get started learning Cadence, but this was just a little sneak peek. Let's go into a little bit more detail about what a resource is. So a resource can be anything, but in the world of Cadence, it usually represents something that is unique in some way. So usually it's used to represent things like NFTs, like tokens, anything that you wouldn't want to get duplicated or lost accidentally, and that you want to make sure that it's treated correctly throughout the transaction. Otherwise, the whole transaction fails. So it's very similar to a real world object, right? If you think about the real world, a lot of it is non-fungible. A lot of it is unique. Every object that you have in your house is unique. It's not exactly the same as someone else's object because it's had a different life, right? And this is much the same as digital assets. Digital assets may be, similar to other people's assets, but your asset is unique in some way, whether it be a serial number, whether it be the fact that it's gone through different ownerships. That specific asset is different, and resources help you represent this at the language level, at the protocol level, and ensure that that unique asset doesn't get lost. So we were talking about Flow's unique account model. Again, the cool thing about Flow is that any resource that you create, you can save in your account, actually in your account. So Flow accounts have storage, and smart contracts and transactions can write things to our accounts and can store things in our accounts. You have obviously a private part of your account where you don't have to, of course, accounts are public due to the nature of the blockchain, but we have a public side of the account where capabilities can be written to that give you access to specific things. So for example, if I have an NFT, I can create a public capability to read that NFT, but not to withdraw it, right? Whereas in my private capabilities, I can transfer it or I can manage it however I want. Like a lot of other chains, we have a local emulator that you can use when you're building. The best step to start, and I'll show you later, is the Flow CLI. And what the Flow CLI you should see as the central command center for all your Flow development. So you download the Flow CLI, through it you can start the emulator. Everything is simulated on your local computer. You can fund wallets, you can deploy transactions, you can deploy smart contracts, you can run transactions. We have this new thing that we call Flow CLI super commands that help you automatically deploy contracts and automatically update them as you're developing. So the emulator is really the best place to start as you're building. Once you have a working product, and especially for the hackathon, what you want to do is put it on a live network, but maybe not a live network that is using a real Flow. So so that's what we call testnet, right? You would deploy your contracts to a live network that is parallel to the mainnet. So I know a lot of you know what testnet is. I'm just explaining in case someone doesn't know. And on testnet, it's an exact copy of mainnet, but obviously it uses testnet tokens, and you can interact with other testnet contracts, but you can't interact with things that are on mainnet, of course. And then when you're ready and you want to share your amazing application with the rest of the world, that's when you deploy to mainnet. And this is where you're effectively going to production. On Flow, we have two different ways to interact with the chain. We have transactions and scripts. The way that you can see this is a transaction is a transaction mutates the chain in some way. So with a transaction has to be authorized and you sign it. It can be signed by multiple accounts. And that, therefore, by signing it, you have the authority to change something in the state of the chain. Transaction fees are super low on Flow. And usually they're all subsidized by wallets. So effectively, transactions on Flow are free, especially for users. And yeah, so that's how you would usually change the state of something. However, if you want to just read data from the blockchain, you want to read a resource that someone has, or you want to do yeah, you want to do a read-only operation, then you don't need a transaction. You actually only need a script. And a script, a bit like a GET request in Web 2, right, is just a way to query data that's on chain. So you don't mutate the chain at all. You just read it and it's completely free. So you can have as many scripts as you want. So the best way to get started is on the Flow Playground. The Flow Playground you can find on play.flow.com. And what it is, it's an emulated blockchain where you can write your smart contracts, you can deploy them to different accounts, and just get familiar with it. If when you're there, you click here to start a tutorial, you'll find a bunch of tutorials from the simple hello world to advanced ones like building a marketplace or building voting mechanics. But if you go in order and you really read through the tutorial and you understand the concepts, you will be a Cadence wizard in no time. And again, we do have boot camps starting today where you can join and actually learn about Cadence with a real teacher. As I mentioned earlier, we have some great local tooling. The Flow CLI is the place to get started if you want to actually develop a dApp, right? So definitely check out the Flow CLI. We recently launched the Flow CLI super commands, as I said, where you just do flow setup. And if you specify a scaffold flag, it will allow you to choose different templates to get started. It'll auto create those templates for you, a bit like create React app. And then you do flow dev. And what it does, it will read what contracts you have in your folders. It'll auto deploy them. It'll auto re-update them as you change them. You can import contracts without having to specify addresses. It really is pretty magical. And through the Flow CLI, you also create testnet accounts. You also can run scripts. You can run transactions. You can run the emulator. So the Flow CLI is your hub. And if you're using VS Code, I highly recommend, if not force you, to download and install the VS Code extension. You can find it in the VS Code marketplace, of course. It's completely free. And what it does is it'll give you cadence highlighting. It'll run its own emulator and just give you general, code autocomplete. It has a cadence language parser, so like it really does give you a great experience writing in Cadence and just building on Flow in general. So how do you actually learn about Flow apart from this webinar, which of course, due to the time constraints, we can't really go into detail and walk you through step by step on how to build everything. Don't worry, we have a lot of educational material. So we have courses on BuildSpace and Learn Web3. And we also have an in-house, well, not in-house, sorry. We have a Flow native community called Emerald DAO, and they have a fantastic bootcamp that's starting today where you can learn Cadence and how to build a dApp using Flow over the course of the next 10 days. And the reason why it's 10 days, it's not because it takes you 10 days. You could probably learn how to build a quick app in like 30 minutes. And we do have a Flow Quick Start on our documentation portal. But the bootcamp will help you get a more thorough understanding of Cadence, and then you also become part of a community that is pretty awesome. So definitely check it out. The two places I would point you to are Flowverse, flowverse.co, which is really the community hub of Flow. This is where all the projects are listed. This is where all the jobs are listed in the Flow universe. Definitely check out Flowverse. And as I mentioned earlier, you should check out Emerald City DAO, which is the biggest developer DAO on Flow. And as I said, their Cadence and Flow Bootcamp is kicking off today. So go to discord.gg/Emerald City and become part of a great community and start learning. Now, lastly, I know we only have a couple minutes left. We have this hackathon going on. If by any chance you join this session without realizing that we have a hackathon going on, we have a hackathon going on. It's on hackathon.flow.com. Check it out. We have a ton of prizes. And if you have any questions, we have a dedicated section in our Discord regarding the hackathon. And that's it. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We only have 4 minutes left. So let's see if there's any questions. If you do have any questions, submit them through the Q&A. And if you think of questions after after this webinar, you can come and join us on Discord and ask there. So I see someone asks, can a DApp prototype submitted after 1 week of development be expected to have all of its intended features fully functional, especially if you're new to Cadence? Now I see that Layne is typing an answer. So Layne, feel free to continue typing. I will also give my answer. So anonymous attendee, of course, a week-long hackathon, you don't have time to go into the nitty-gritty and be a Cadence expert. You can also start now. You can start today, and you can start learning about Cadence today, right? So you have more than a week. You have 10 to the 26. You have around 2 weeks, which I know is not the most amount of time in the world. But how you should see this hackathon, this is the start of your journey. Your app doesn't have to be perfect. Your knowledge of Cadence doesn't have to be perfect. But yeah, this is an opportunity to kind of it's a forcing function for people to kind of get practical experience and build something, because that really is the best way to learn. You can read the documentation all day. You can, browse code all day, but by trying to build something, you will find the shortest path to learning what you need to know to build what you want to build. But I will also leave Layne to answer as well. Cool. Thanks, Morgan, for the thank yous. I'm glad you found it useful. And I will leave any time for any other questions if there are.
Yeah, I don't think so. We have any other questions left. Thank you so much, Andrea and Layne, to be here. We are very glad to have you here, and thank you all the participants for joining too. And we have scheduled other sessions every day till 28th, so feel free to join from tomorrow as well. And also there is lots to come, and you can share your experience over Twitter and share it with your friend as well if they want to join. And if you haven't registered for the hackathon yet, feel free to register, learn more about the blockchain flow. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thank you so much for hosting the event, and definitely apply to DevFolio if you haven't done so already. That way you can stay up to date with everything that's happening. You can get reminders. You are basically in the loop. So if you're planning on joining but haven't signed up to DevFolio, definitely sign up. You don't have to submit anything when you sign up, but definitely sign up now as soon as possible. So, and thank you for all the love of people coming in. It was great to have you. Thanks for having us, and good luck in the hackathon. Can't wait to see what you all build.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Thank you.